Okay, so the first set of measurements we'll be making, we'll be measuring the mass or measuring the density of 3 different liquids. And we'll be doing this by taking an empty graduated cylinder, adding the liquid to that graduated cylinder, finding the new mass, and finding the volume of it. So let's start with an empty graduated cylinder. So let me go ahead and share the video of the balance. Okay, so let me show you, here's the graduated cylinder. We're going to put this on the balance and take the measure of that. I was able to pick up a new balance today from the lab that is a little bit easier to read the screen of than the one we had before. So first thing, I'm going to zero this. And so it is zeroed, and then we will put the graduated cylinder on there. So then go ahead and write down that number as the mass of the empty graduated cylinder. If that is difficult for you to read, it is 29.14 grams. So that's what you'll be writing in for the mass of the empty graduated cylinder. The next thing we'll do is we'll add liquid A to the graduated cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and grab liquid A and pour a little bit of this into our cylinder. Okay, so that's probably enough. Okay, so that is liquid A, and then I'm going to put this onto the balance. And then go ahead and write that down as the mass of the graduated cylinder plus liquid A. And if you're having trouble reading that, it's 48.86 grams. So you can write that down. And then I need to grab my background here. The next thing will be to measure the volume of this liquid. So we'll do that. So I will move the balance out of the way for the moment. And then we will adjust camera. And I'm going to zoom that in, I think, a little bit. Okay. So it's still adjusting, so just wait a minute and I'll let you know. Okay. I think it is done with adjusting. So this is the volume measure. So remember to be guessing the last digit. Remember to look at the marks that are there and guess one digit beyond that. Also, please remember we discussed maybe taking a screenshot and using that for a discussion with yes. And so good question. The units are milliliters for this. Let me go ahead and I'm going to point out a few things here that might be helpful. So this kind of longer line, there's a 20 there. And then up here is a 30. And then the marks here, you've got 21, 22, 23, 24. The somewhat longer one in the middle there is 25. So those marks are not guesses. You want to be guessing a digit beyond that. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I think I will go ahead and move on. So first thing, I'm going to dispose of this. Ideally, we would take the time to dry it out before moving on. It will not matter that much with the level of precision we have. I'm going to just check in the chat and see if there's something there before we go on. Okay, so there's a request for a darker background. I can probably do that. So just give me a minute to find another background. I have another one we can try out. So a bit of a cardboard box here we can try. We're going to move on to Liquid B. And I think this time what we'll do is we'll start with the volume and then go to the mass. And we're going to do that simply because we already have the camera set up for volume. Okay, so I think that's probably enough. And I will get this set up so it's easier to read. And we wanted a different background, so we'll get rid of that one and bring this one in. And try, I'm gonna turn this over because there's a, okay, so I'm going to see there's some messages in the chat. This is a question about the empty mass of the empty cylinder. I think that's what people are discussing there. Okay. There's a few bubbles in here. I'm going to just kind of adjust for those. And then we'll take a look at this. So, okay, so first of all, just want to ask if that background is working better. So this is Liquid B. We're measuring the volume for Liquid B. And I have a different background by request. I don't know if that's, okay, so it looks like people do like that better. So again, 20 is this longer line down here. 30 is the longer line up here. 25 is a semi-long line in the middle. And then you've got 21, 22, 23, 24 in between there. And again, remember to be guessing the last digit. Also remember, it might be helpful to take a screenshot so you can have a discussion of this in your group. Okay, so I think if there's nothing else coming up in the chat, I think we'll go ahead and move on to finding the mass. And I'm not seeing any more questions, so we can go, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we'll open the balance, make sure it's zeroed. It looks zeroed. So then we'll put the empty, or not empty, we'll put the cylinder on the balance. It's not empty, it has Liquid B in that. And that is the mass of the cylinder plus liquid B. And I will read that for you if you are having difficulty. It's 50.88 grams is what I'm seeing there. I'm going to check in the chat. It looks like there may have been a question to maybe go back and do the volume again. So I can do that. And again, the mass here is 50, it's fluctuating between 50.88 and 50.87. So either one of those would be fine for the mass for this one. So let's go back and it looks like we do want to look at this volume again. So we can do that. And in terms of being a guess, you should be guessing the last digit, right? So that's part of doing it correctly. You probably didn't think guessing would your teacher would tell you guessing is the right way to do chemistry. But we guessed the last digit. Okay, so 20 again at the bottom, and then you're counting up from there. Okay, so again, feel free to take a screenshot if that is helpful before we move on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead then and start getting ready for liquid C. This is the volume, this is still for liquid B. So I think some people wanted to see that again. Yeah, so this is still B. Please, again, take a screenshot so if you have disagreements in your group, you can have further discussion there. And as far as, I guess I will say one more thing because of what was in the chat. As you're going from 20, the long one here, 21, 22, is the cursor showing up there? 23, 24, 25. And then as you're making the guess, remember to be guessing the bottom of the meniscus and not the top of the meniscus. So that will be maybe a little different than some of what I had seen earlier. It's pretty close, but just kind of keep that in mind as you make that measurement. Are we ready for liquid C? Okay, if not, please say something in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to liquid C. So we'll dispose of liquid B. So we have a waste container here. And then we will get liquid C. Again, ideally, we would take the time to dry this out. I'm not doing that today in the interest of getting through this pretty quickly, and with the accuracy of the balance, it will not actually matter that much. If we had an analytical balance, we would definitely want to take the time for that. So this one is liquid C. And I need to put our background up. And then we'll move that just a little bit. Let's move it. Okay. I think I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so here we have 30 as the longer one at the bottom, and then 35 is kind of the partially longer one, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in between there. And again, you want to be guessing the last digit, which is not one of the marks that is shown, but it is the correct way to make the measurement. Okay, so I do see something in the chat. Okay, good question. We have not yet done the mass for C. So we're going sometimes a little bit out of order just based on where the equipment is set up at the moment. So we will get to the mass here in a minute. So everybody ready with the volume measurement before we go on to the mass? Okay. Okay. So I think we'll go ahead and move on. You might, again, maybe take a screenshot if you want to have a discussion with your group. So next we'll do the mass. So we'll start by making sure we're at 0. Okay, we are at 0, and then we'll go ahead and put the balance, or put the cylinder on the balance. And that is the mass of liquid C plus the cylinder. It's 67.27 grams, if you're not able to see that. 67.27 grams. And so it's both of those, and then you have the mass of, should have the mass of the empty cylinder. Everybody okay? Right now what you should have is the mass of the empty cylinder, the mass of the cylinder plus the liquid for A, B, and C, and then the volume of A, B, and C. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Actually, before I do that, let's talk about where we are, okay? So what we've done is we've done this part, we've done cylinder plus liquid, volume of liquid. We're not going to do part B, so don't worry about that. What we're going to do next is you're going to go to your breakout rooms for a few minutes, and you should during that time be able to fill in the rest of this, so the rest of these calculations during that time. So when you're done with that, come back out of the breakout room. When people start coming out, we'll move on to part C. Okay, so for part C, again, we're doing weight, height, diameter will be the measurements, and then you'll do this calculation for the volume and the density. I'm not going to have you do this part down here. So we'll just stop after this, and then we'll get a chance to do displacement with another measurement here in a minute. So questions about the plan before we make the measurements? And the first thing, let me go ahead and show you what we're measuring. So this is the metal cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the balance. And so write down that number as the weight. And again, I can read that off if you're having difficulty seeing that. It's 50.19 grams, so 50.19 grams. And that is the weight of the metal cylinder for part C. And then we'll go ahead and measure the length and the diameter for it. So I will move the balance out of the way. And we will do those measures. So go right there. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. And then we can measure the diameter. Hey, it's doing this part automatically. Okay, so I think it finally figured it out. So, so go and make that measurement. What I would like you to do today with this measurement is to make this as a centimeter measurement. So when you see this, let me point this out. So this is 1 point, so this big line here, treat that as 1.0 centimeters. And then all of those little marks in between are, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, etc. centimeters. And then you want to guess the last digit. Remember also, please take a screenshot. So if you have, a discussion with your group later, you have something to compare it to. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the length. So we'll put it down and then do the length. Okay. Again, feel free to take a screenshot if you need to for a discussion in your group. Okay, so let's go back to the experiment and discuss where we're at. So we've done weight, height, and diameter for the metal cylinder. I'm going to put you back in your groups. You'll do calculation for volume and density, and that's kind of all you need to do right now. And then once you've done that, we'll come back out and look at the last two things we'll be doing. So I will open the rooms now. Okay, so let's look at finding the density of aluminum, and we'll be doing two different things here. The first thing we'll be doing is looking at some aluminum that is an irregular shape. So I'm going to turn this light back on so we can turn on the camera. And let me turn this off so the bright light isn't there for you. So let's go ahead and go to our camera. And the aluminum we'll be looking at is, let me just go ahead and pull this up to the camera so you can see what we're looking at, is this. We have this very irregular shape. So what you just did, you could look at the dimensions and make a calculation. For this, we're not able to do that. What we'll do instead is we'll put this into a beaker and find the mass that way. So let's go ahead and get our balance ready to go. So I'm going to put a beaker on, and I believe it asks you for the mass of the empty beaker. So go ahead and write this down, 50.56 grams. If you're not able to read that, that's what it says, 50.56 grams. And that, again, is the mass of the empty beaker. And then we'll go ahead and add the metal sample to that. Okay, so the metal is now in the beaker, and we will put that on the balance. Okay. So this is the new mass, 74.94 grams. That is the mass of the cylinder plus the metal. So go ahead and put that in. Now, one thing I want to mention about how we just did this, we are doing this in a couple of steps because in the lab, you would not put that sample directly on the balance. And if someone else is around, you want to kind of make sure you're not, you're leaving some space for the next person to go in there. So that's why the procedure was written the way that it was. So those are the masses. Any questions on the mass before we move on to the volume? Okay, so I'm going to move the balance out of the way, and we will get the volume in here. So what we have is we have a graduated cylinder filled with some water. And so we'll take a look at that first. First thing we'll do. And I think I should zoom in on that a little bit. There was a question in the chat about finding the mass of the aluminum. And what you'll be doing there is you have the mass of the beaker and then the mass of the beaker with the aluminum. So you'll figure out from there how to get the mass of the aluminum. I might have to zoom out. Let me check on the chat to see. Okay, so it took a while, but it looks like we have zeroed in on that. So this is the volume of water in the cylinder. Okay, so you can see the 30 there, and then the marks for 31, 32, 33, 34. And then remember that you want to be guessing the last digit. Again, you might want to take a screenshot so that you can have a discussion with your group about this if necessary. And then what we're going to do with this, we don't care about the volume of the water. What we're going to do is we're going to add the metal to this, and we'll see the difference in the volume. So the water will change volume because we put something in it, and that difference is going to be the mass. I'm sorry, not mass. The difference between this volume and the next volume is the volume of the metal that we're adding. So I'm going to go ahead and add this metal. Okay, so I've added the metal to the graduated cylinder, and let me just kind of show you it's down here in the bottom, and it's taking up some space, and because it's taking up space, the volume of the liquid is different, and we're going to measure the new volume of the liquid. Again, feel free to take a screenshot so you can discuss with your group here in a minute when you go back to your groups. Okay. So if we're okay with that, I will go on to the next thing. So let's go back and discuss what we just did. We just looked at this table. So we made some of the measurements here. initial, final volume, mass of empty beaker, mass of beaker, and aluminum. And then you'll need to figure out how to do these calculations based on the measurements that we made. So that's table 1. Next, we'll look at table 2. So for table 2, we are going to be looking at a piece of aluminum foil and making measurements for that aluminum foil. So let me get our camera set up for that. And we are going to have to zoom out a bit here. So let's go ahead to the next dimension. So I'm basically just turning this 90 degrees and then putting this down here. Okay, so that is, let's see. That is your measurement for the other dimension. So if you had done length, then this would be the width. And again, you want to be guessing the last digit. And take a screenshot so you can discuss that with your group. Any questions on that before we move on to the mass? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We have our balance here again. Let me check on the chat before we so it looks like you're back. So I think what we can do is when we go to groups, I'll make sure everyone's in the right spot. And then if we need to go back and remeasure something with someone, we can. Okay, so we'll find the mass of this foil. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on the balance. And that is the mass. So if you're having difficulty reading that, it is 1.11. So that is the mass of the foil. So let's go back to the document. So we're right here. So we have the mass of the foil, length of foil, width of foil. So we've got all of the measurements we need. So I want to say a little bit about what you'll be doing with this information, and then the rest of the time will be in your groups. So for question 1 down here, you're using the data from table 1 to find the density of the aluminum. Some of you may have already done that, but that's what you're doing for this question. For question 2, you're using your result from question 1 and comparing it to the accepted value of the density for aluminum. So let me tell you what that is. I want you to use 2.70, so 2.70 units grams per cubic centimeter as the accepted value. So wherever you see actual in this equation, use 2.70. Wherever you see experimental, use your results from question 1. And then the final analysis question is this one, where you're finding the thickness of the foil based on the measurements that you made along with the density of aluminum. This is probably the most complicated question on here. So I'm not going to go through it right now, but when your groups get to question 3 of the data analysis, please raise your hand and I'll come in and help you go through that. And then after that are the questions. So these questions are things that you can do before you've done any of the data analysis. So if you would rather do the questions first, that's fine. You don't even have to have any of the data from the lab in order to answer these. So a few things here. Go ahead and skip question 2 because we did not use the hydrometers today. And then also skip question 6 because that is also about the hydrometers. So you'll be answering questions 1, 3, and 4. I guess there's not a question 5. So questions 1, 3, and 4. And then the data analysis questions 1, 2, and 3. So that's what we will be doing for the rest of the time in our groups. When you are done, each person, please upload your lab to Canvas. So everybody's turning one in. You're working in groups to help decide on answers, but I want to see everyone with, making the correct significant figures in the measurements today. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.